We're live ahora. Hello there and welcome everybody to today's virtual space here on LinkedIn Live. And you have noticed that we are a little bit out of our usual hour, because usually we stream at 3 p.m. CET. Tonight or today is the first time that we stream at 7 p.m. CET. It's also a little bit to try out and test out when our audience is connecting. You know that we are streaming to 3 different channels. So we are streaming to our main platform, LinkedIn. We're streaming to Facebook and to YouTube. So welcome to everybody out there. And we are picking up on what we have been talking in the past weeks. So it was always around the topic about virtual teams, global virtual teams, remote work. Last week, we were digging into the topic of gamification also for virtual teams. It was a tremendous conversation with Mohsin. And today, I'm super happy because I have been following my guest today for the past month. I have been consuming her newsletter. I've been consuming all the content from her Collaboration Superpowers super webpage, I would call it. And therefore, I'm super happy to discuss today with Lisette Sutherland from Collaboration Superpower the topic of virtual teamwork. And with that, I'm opening the virtual doors to Lisette.
Hello. Thanks for that awesome introduction. Thank you.
Hello there. And you're showing exactly what I love to use, but I'm just not fast enough. And most of the times I'm just too slow organizing my cards around me, because you have the beautiful cards, the super cards designed, right?
Yeah, indeed. It's like just to show people like, hey, wait, you're on mute. But of course, yeah, I've got them all next to me. Exactly. See, it's super handy. So I have them next to me, and I know kind of which 3 or 4 cards I'm going to need depending on the event that I'm doing. So a workshop or a talk or a training or something. So then I'll know which ones to use.
I think I definitely still need to train myself, because I have them, and usually I have them, well, not well organized around me. And then I'm like, what is happening? What is happening? I'm looking after them, and I'm maybe sometimes even pulling up the wrong card. So I'm still in the training for that, but I love it. And it already shows, well, Lisette, not many people have been using this year like props or objects or other things like beyond the virtual sphere, right? So I see it's a beautiful example on how to make it different, whatever you're doing, if it's a virtual keynote, a training, or a workshop, right?
Well, yeah, and one of the things that I've actually learned from doing this is that when COVID hit, we went online and we did everything online, but using physical and virtual tools at the same time helps engage different parts of the brain. So in my workshops, for example, we do questions and icebreaker questions where I ask people to write down like a picture that they're thinking of. So you get like all kinds of weird things, and you notice that it definitely engages people differently than if they have to write on a whiteboard. So, yeah.
Absolutely. And I also think, for example, the you're on mute sign, I think it's so much nicer to use that than, sorry, we can't hear you. Sorry, we can't hear you.
Yeah, they probably can't hear you either. You know, sometimes they're also like, something's wrong with the tech. So
But Lisette, let us go one step back, because, well, I'm a super fan of your cards. Those of you out there, you should definitely check out Lisette's webpage, Collaboration Superpowers. And on that webpage, you don't find only valuable resources, but also the possibility to buy those cards to engage with your participants in a different way. But Lisette, so we were talking just before going live that both of us are exhausted and tired. Both of us are working virtually. So of course, this year for our businesses, it was a boost. Help us understand, give us a bit of a context. When did you go into the virtual space? When did you found Collaboration Superpowers, and what was the aim?
So, okay, I'll try to keep it short because it's kind of a fantastical story in general. But it actually started almost 20 years ago when I was living in Los Angeles, and I was working for a guy who was trying to eradicate death. So basically, he didn't want to die, and he thought that the solution was if he could just get the right people working together and sharing data, that we could solve the problem of aging. And I thought like, oh, that's a crazy idea. But it got me thinking like, what else could we do together if we got the right people together in the room? So I started going down the rabbit hole, and my job at the time was actually studying the other online project management tools out there, which was great because I ended up becoming like a tool junkie. I just love tools, and so that sort of started me on the tool junkie part. But once I understood the concept of, oh wow, the best people to solve big problems are not always in the same room together, then I went down the rabbit hole and I started just asking questions and interviewing people about how are they doing it? Like, what kind of projects are you working on? What problems are you solving? And how are you doing it remotely? So at that point, I mean, it was just sort of a curiosity, but at that point, Collaboration Superpowers just sort of it started with just interviews, and then I would interview people and I would say, I'm writing a book and I was wondering if I could interview you for the book. But to be honest, it was just an excuse in the beginning. I wasn't actually writing a book. I had no intention of writing a book. And then it turns out that there was a market for it. Little did I know. And people started asking about the book. And I thought, and enough people started asking that, and I thought, oh my God, I actually have to write this book now because I've done enough interviews and I've used this line too often. And so now I have to write the book. So then I wrote the book with the help of my co-author, Kirsten Janine Nelson. She's the co-author of the book. She's my editor, but she helped write so much of it that I made her a co-author because I couldn't have done it without her. Yeah, and then the book was written, and the workshop, the Work Together Anywhere workshop, they were both done sort of at the same time. So it's, the book is a bit of a transcript of the workshop in some ways. So that's a very short, rambly version of how Collaboration Superpowers started. But it was all from this one weird guy's vision of not wanting to die.
But
And
it's
it's still
fantastic
alive.
how you can get ideas from other people with crazy ideas and transform it into your own business. So it's like really an inspiring example of how to convert or transform ideas to your context.
Yeah, indeed. I mean, and I never meant to start a business, actually, to be honest. One of the things that happened along the way was that while I was working for this online project management company, it was called QTask at the time. That way I don't have to say online project management company. It was called QTask. It was an online project management tool. And while I was working for it, out of the blue, that's another long story, but my favorite band in the world asked me to go on tour with them. But I loved working for QTask. And so I had a bit of a dilemma. Like, if I quit my job and go on tour with this band, like that'll be fun, but then I lose my dream job. So I went to the company CEO and I told him my dilemma, and he actually gave me a mobile router 20 years ago, almost 15 years ago. He gave must have been one of the first mobile routers. It was really clunky, like a big giant thing that you had to stick to the window of the van. But he gave me a mobile router and he just said, have a really good time and just make sure you get your work done. And so I ended up going on tour with a band. And during the day, I would work from the van. And at night, I would be a merchandiser for the band. And it was just one of the best times of my life. So, and I forgot why I even started that story now. But it was and I ended up moving to the Netherlands. So this was all about how I wasn't about to start a business. So I moved to the Netherlands with this band because I thought, oh, I'll go on their European tour and they're from the Netherlands. And then QTask went out of business overnight. And I was all of a sudden in the Netherlands. And I thought, okay, I can either go home or I can start a company and work from here, because with my visa in the Netherlands, I wasn't able to work for companies here. So I had to start my own company in order to stay here. So I'm an accidental entrepreneur. And I think the company has grown despite me because I am not a businesswoman by nature, but I'm super grateful to be in this position.
Well, and that's amazing because the story from an accidental entrepreneur to such a successful businesswoman and business owner is amazing. So I really, really love it. And what also inspires me is, so you started to work remotely 20 years ago by not wanting to write a book, but at the end you have sort of an Amazon bestseller there on your shelf, right? So also the book.
It's not a bestseller yet, but yeah, it's not doing too bad. Yeah.
Let me start with that question, because we're going to talk about Collaboration Superpowers. And what was your experience when you started working remotely 20 years ago, and how did it develop? Because of course, the experience that you had 20 years ago, how does it relate to what we are doing now in 2020? Is it that different, or is it not that different?
Well, the technology is way better than it was 20 years ago. I mean, internet broadband speed is so much. I mean, I have 200 megabits per second upload and download here in my house. I would have, that was not possible 20 years ago. And so things were a lot slower and a lot clunkier. And there were very few online project management tools out there at the time. I mean, Basecamp had just come up, Zoho had just started. So it was all a bit at the beginning. And people thought we were insane for what we were doing. I always wondered why it didn't pick up faster than it did, because I thought we can design our own lifestyles now. Who wouldn't want to do that? Like, why would you go 9 to 5 when you can design however you want to live? But in the past, it was just 20 years ago, it just wasn't really done. It wasn't so common. But now with the tooling, I mean, with COVID, we have to. But now with the tooling, there's not really an excuse anymore not to do it. And I think before COVID, the biggest excuse for not working remote was because managers were afraid that people would be lazy. And of course, what we've always known and what COVID has shown us is that the opposite is true, that people are working harder than they would at the office and they're burning out. And laziness is not the issue. It's really overworking that's the issue.
Absolutely. I just saw recently a post on LinkedIn by a university professor talking about a study that she undertook about remote workers, and particularly those who were thrown into the virtual space this year, working 30% more than usually. And we also know that many of the remote workers or the employees were cut off hours, and they still work more. So I also have the feeling that this is absolutely the opposite is true, as you were saying it. But still, it is so frustrating to some extent, probably, to understand that still we have this big trust issue in our organizations that goes on from managers asking their employees in remote work to connect. During COVID, for example, I had examples in Austria where they asked their employees to connect at 11 with camera on to understand what's in the background. There were cases of private detectives in Germany who were following up on the employees. So the trust thing, of course, is the super basis, as you were saying, for remote teams. When you work now with leaders, and we talk about online collaboration, digital leadership, what do leaders need to focus on beyond trust? Because trust, we know, it's one of the basic pillars.
Yeah, so there's a couple of things that I tell leaders that are really important. One is, I feel like the role of the leader is to set the direction and set the goal and then get out of the way so that the professionals can take us there. And so the role of the leader then becomes removing roadblocks and impediments and just making sure that the team has everything that they need to succeed. That doesn't mean that it has to be remote. It's remote or in person, right? But a leader, to me, that's the same role. It's the same. But remote, it becomes really critical. And so the things that I focus on with leadership, one, trust, like you said, trust that it's possible, because now we've seen it. It's been proven. It is possible to do complex projects globally, remotely. And then also the building of trust within a team. And my building blocks of trust, I'll start with, are reliability, consistency, and responsiveness. So can I rely on you to get the work done? Are you doing what you say you're going to do? Is it consistent, high quality? And can I find you if I need to? So those are sort of the building blocks. And then I would add on, I learned from one of my interviews from Dr. Clue. He does treasure hunts online and offline. But he said that likability needs to be added to that equation. If you feel like the team has got your back, then you're likely to give more to the team. So we don't always like the people that we work with, but we can set up an environment where people know that they're going to be okay, that the team has got their back, that even when they make a mistake, that nobody's going to get outed, that we can learn from the mistakes and move on. So in that role of leadership, I would say, one, the leader is there to create the team agreement together with the team on how we're going to work. What are our ways of working? So I would say lead the team in creating a team agreement together. Most teams don't have one these days, but I still think it's critical for remote teams to just understand where's the information that we're going to need to share, how do we access it, security protocols, how are we going to communicate with each other, given that there are a million tools. We have to figure out which ones are we going to use, and then how do we know what each other are doing, and just outlining that for the team. So there's trust, there's the team agreement, and then I would say The other part for leadership is to provide the tools and the training that the team needs. And that's just part of taking the obstacles out of the way. And the thing with remote leadership, and I think that, and whether you're a leader or a person just working in the remote field, I think the biggest thing to recognize is that this is a new medium of working, and that in person and remote are two different work mediums. And I like to make the analogy with radio and television. They both broadcast information, but you design your content for each of those mediums differently. And with COVID, what happened was we took what we were doing in person and we just translated it directly online. And it doesn't translate well because with remote, we have different ways of expressing ourselves. We have different ways of building trust, different ways of giving feedback, and the structure of our workday changes. So I think that leaders need to recognize that this is a new medium of work, and that, you know, a lot of people think of remote and they think, umbrella drinks and pajama bottoms. And, you know, that's totally not, it's totally not what it is. Or like, you know, working at the beach, you see all these stock photos of people working at the beach. And I don't know if anybody's ever really tried working at the beach, but it is not possible. Like, it is not possible. Sun in the screen, sand in your keyboard, it's not what you want. So I'm sure there are situations where you could work at a beach, but anyway, it's not.
It's so fun. It's also our digital nomads' fault to some extent, because I know when I'm around the digital nomads, all of us, and I did it also at the beginning, to be honest, that we take those fun pictures and great pictures where we're sitting sort of at the beach, but we know that I couldn't even work in that moment because I didn't see anything. I ran out of battery, then I had the sand everywhere, was everything uncomfortable, because you also need to sit properly, right? And
Right.
it's also
Or have a table.
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So back
So
to the normal desk, right? With a nice view. That's of course amazing if you have that.
yeah, of course, like a great view is a great view. But yeah, so people think of remote as being like lounging somehow. There's like this lounge feel to it, but it's not the case. It is a different medium of work. So I always say to leaders, you need to train your teams, because otherwise we're just going to translate the in-person stuff online, and it doesn't translate well, as we're all seeing, because everybody's now ending up in endless online meetings, and that's not the point of remote working. That's not a healthy way to do it.
Absolutely. We had an intriguing conversation with Malut Sakarali from Remote Forever about this issue of us being involved, or being sort of in too many meetings every day, just because we were focusing so much on synchronous communication, as we're not good, and we don't know how to asynchronously communicate well. But let me ask you a question. So we were talking about the pillars, the things virtual or digital leaders need to focus on. If we talk about tools, what are some best practices and tools? Because you also said we need to train our people. So if we have the team rules set up, what tools would you, if somebody can start from scratch? Let's take it this way. If somebody can start like greenfield, what tools would you suggest to use, and then how to train your people? Because I also know how long it takes to have a team of people move from one tool, one behavior of communicating to another. So what would be your suggestions?
So at a very bare minimum, people, I feel, need to have video, some sort of a video communication tool, a chat tool. So whether it's Microsoft Teams, which has it all, or you're using Slack with Zoom, or, you know, whatever combination of that. So video and chat for sure, and not email. I mean, email is important, but you need group chat if you're working with a group in general. So it just is way more lightweight than email. But on top of that, I think one of the biggest virtual skills that people can learn is virtual whiteboarding. So learn Mural, you learn Miro, learn Microsoft Teams Whiteboard. It's also a trickier one, or Jamboards even. But one of the things with remote that we're not doing is we used to just get up to the whiteboard and draw our ideas, like, let me just show you what I mean. And then you end up with like weird lines and squiggles, but everybody knows what you're talking about. And since remote, we don't do that very much. And it's really I think it's a big missing item. So virtual whiteboarding, where we can ideate, draw our ideas with each other, put the pictures down, draw the workflows, that's something that's really missing. So I would say video, chat, and virtual whiteboarding will get you a long way. It will get you a long way. And if you want to get more sophisticated, I'm a big fan of virtual offices. And there's a number of, there's like 20 different virtual offices out there, but essentially you're looking at a floor plan and you can move yourself from room to room in this floor plan just by, clicking on a different room. You can only see and hear the people that are in the same room as you, but you can see where everybody else is on the virtual floor plan. And to me, a virtual office really helps because sometimes something's really small, but then you have to call a meeting to discuss it with somebody. And like a meeting is almost more than it needs to be, because really what you want to do is just go ask a question down the hall. And a virtual office allows you to have presence with your colleagues and to get those quick chats in whenever you need a quick chat, so you don't have to call a meeting. So yeah, there's many, many, many more tools, but like video, chat, whiteboards, and Office. And the one thing that I am missing is the online project management tools. So a way to track and visualize your work with each other. I think that's crucial, but that seems almost like a basic thing, but because everybody that's working on a team needs a place to store their tasks. So whether it's Trello or Teams or Yammer or whatever, there's hundreds of project management tools these days. Sadly, QTask no longer exists. It was one of the best tools I've ever seen, but sometimes the best ones don't make it. So it's not fair, but yeah, those are the basics. And from there, you can just get fancier and fancier. But while I'm a tool junkie, I really do think we need to experiment with new tools, but minimize the number of tools that we're using, the very minimum that we need. Because we all have hundreds of passwords now, right? We have password managers from all the tools we're using. So, but it's overwhelming for a team.
I also think that's like sort of the conclusion for me over this year. We're always experimenting with a lot of different tools because we need to know them. Our clients have different infrastructures, IT infrastructures, but still also to keep it simple with the 3 basic tools that you need. That definitely is a task management. It needs to be something for communication and maybe an informal channel, whether that's in Slack or another tool, whatever. But I think that's you're totally right that it should be a minimum and not too many tools, because otherwise it gets sort of overwhelming again. And if we think about back about COVID, so you were also mentioning, and we were talking a little bit about what leaders had to do. So some of them were facing the challenge to really deal with all these new tools, deal with a totally new and different virtual environment, whether they want it or not. And we have here a question that really relates very much to leading in a complex environment or in a changing environment. And Dieter is asking, do you think that during COVID, the leaders have also to focus on the why? And if so, why, I would ask you.
That is a great question. I mean, in a way, it always starts with why, not to steal from Simon Sinek, but it does always start with why, because anytime we're doing something, you want to know what is the purpose. Even every meeting that I host, the first question is, why are we here? What are we hoping to accomplish in this meeting today? And in fact, the CEO of QTask at the time, he used to tell me, put your objective at the very beginning of your email so that you know exactly why you're writing this. And then I just started leaving the objective there for the person that was getting it. Like, my objective is this, and then I would write the rest of it. But that's also a start with why. So yeah, I would say start with why. Yeah, I don't even know what else you would start with. Like, why are we doing this is kind of always the first question that needs to be asked. But we skip it because we're so busy. And I have to say, remote work during a pandemic is not the normal remote work. So when, we're saying, should leaders also focus on why? I think, yes, we should focus on why. And man, we should focus on giving people a break, because when you see what people have to manage at home, like with kids and online schooling, and just the fact that we're in a pandemic, that there's a killer virus outside our homes everywhere we go, it's a lot.
Absolutely. I think what I heard and have seen, but I'm just commenting, we don't need to discuss that in detail. I saw a lot the question, why or what for? So maybe there are already variations of the why coming up that I've seen on social media to being discussed. But I have a question. So we were talking about the why and also the tools and this complex environment that virtual teams are working in. So how would you onboard your people? What are sort of the trainings or the suggestions that you provide digital leaders or virtual leaders with so that they get everybody on board and they train them also to get on board in terms of technical tools?
So onboarding is where a lot of companies drop the ball, in person and remote, but remote makes it like it's a bigger ball to drop because you have less context with that person. So with onboarding, you very quickly want to set out what success looks like and what failure looks like, and then put feedback loops in place as fast as possible. So sounds easy, just like saying, oh, losing weight, you have to eat more or eat less and exercise more, right? Like sounds easy, but so it's defining success and failure sounds easy, but it's actually tough to do. And then checking in regularly, especially at the beginning. One of the things that a company that I worked with did is they set up a Trello board for their new hires. And on that, the hire would have to work through the Trello board in terms of getting themselves all set up. But it was a way for them to proactively approach almost everybody in the company. So you had to get yourself set up with finance, which means that you had to call Tahira to make sure that you were all set up in the finance department. And then you had to make sure that you got added to the right marketing tools. So, then you had to talk to Nadine because she was the one that had to make sure that you were on, that you had access to the website and all the different things. Oh, and then you had, so you had to work through the Trello board. And by doing that, you would meet all the people in the company. So, they would, and then we would set up a virtual coffee, but it would be up to the new person to set up the virtual coffee and say, like, I would like to meet the team at this point. So we would have the new person be proactive and they had a buddy. So we assigned them a buddy so that they had somebody that they could ask the questions to, because not everybody that you hire is going to be comfortable being so proactive. It's kind of rare, actually. So it's nice to have a buddy. But in terms of onboarding, I mean, there's some simple goals with onboarding, right? You want to get the person to know the company and to know their position and to know what success looks like as fast as possible, and to also meet all the people as fast as possible. So the best way I've seen it done is really to have it be a proactive way where the new person has an excuse to contact all the people that they need, and then they just work through the tasks. So that was my favorite way of doing it. But I am a big believer in the onboarding process because I've also shown up at companies. Like I worked at this company once in person, and I showed up on the first day and I had a desk, but I didn't have a chair or a computer. Like they had just kind of forgotten that, they'd kind of forgotten I was going to show up. And man, it was so demotivating. On day one, I was just like, oh no, I've chosen poorly. Like this is not going to work out well. And it didn't. I lasted about a year and it didn't work out well. So it's a onboarding is your chance to wow your new employee. So make sure you do that. Like don't leave them with an empty desk and no laptop. That's for sure.
Yeah, and if we just translate your example into the virtual space, it would be the same as, and I heard plenty of examples of that, no access to the cell phone, no access to the VPN, no access to the emails, no access to the cloud share or whatever they were using. So also that is something that is super important when onboarding in a virtual remote team, of course.
Yeah.
You were already talking, so the way you were describing the onboarding process and that Trello board where the new hire was meant to go through all different contexts, it's a perfect way also to combat this out of sight, out of mind syndrome. Because we often hear that in virtual teams, and of course the virtual offices that we know that are out there that you can use also helps to combat that. But for example, I frankly speaking don't know many companies who have a virtual office. So those who have it, fantastic. But those who don't, what would you suggest for a virtual leader to combat the out of sight, out of mind syndrome, or for their team members? It's not only the leader who has to do that.
The feedback loops comes to mind immediately. So regular retrospectives with the team of just and this isn't a project debrief, it's a how are we doing as a team conversation. Software teams have this built in. If they're using agile methodology, they have these retrospectives sort of built into their processes. They do them at least once every 1 or 2 weeks. And it's kind of amazing how much comes out in each one of those sessions, right? Like it's only been 2 weeks and we know how we're working as a team, but they're critical points of contact. And I think when we're working remotely, having those feedback loops in place actually helps know that, like, oh, I'm going to have a chance to blow some steam, or I can bring up that small thing that was too small to say in the moment, but I don't want to just leave it, So it gives us a chance to know that we're going to have time to express ourselves. So I would put retrospectives and those kind of feedback loops in place. On top of that, I think for leaders, it's really good to do one-on-ones. Just call people and check in. It doesn't have to be a scheduled thing. It doesn't have to be a meeting. But I think back to 10 years ago when I was in the Netherlands and I worked for another company in California who was building private social networks. So like Facebooks, but they were for companies. So they'd be private and just for that company, but they had chat and stuff and you can post. And at the time, he would call me at his morning on his way to work, and it was my afternoon. He was in California, I'm in the Netherlands. And in the beginning, he was just calling. I would be like, boss, what do you need? And he's like, oh, I'm just calling to say hi and just to see, check in. Do you need anything? Is anything going on? And in the beginning, I'd be like, no, everything's good. I'm going to get back to work. And then sometimes I would really need to talk. And so having those one-on-one conversations just gave the opportunity to bring stuff up if they were needed. So sometimes we had a 1-minute conversation and sometimes it was 20 minutes, but that he made the time for it was so important. And it's been 10 years, but I went back to San Francisco in January to visit some friends, and he was one of the people that I visited because after enough one-on-ones, you form a real friendship with people. And not that you have to be friends with everybody, but at least if you're a leader, you got to just check in, especially with COVID, check in with your team, make sure that everybody's okay. So that's 2. And then there's one more method that I want to mention because I just found it was a wonderful method. And it was when I worked for the Management 3.0 company as their remote office manager. And what we used to do was a system called merit money. And the way that it worked is every month, each person got 100 points. And the only rule was you weren't allowed to keep the points for yourself. You had to give them to your colleagues, but you could do it for any reason and it had to be transparent. So we had a tool, we call it was, you earned it. No, Bonusly. It was called Bonusly. And so we used a tool called Bonusly to give each other points, and you could give it throughout the month. You could give it all at the end, and it could be for anything. So 10 points to Jen for helping me out the other day, 20 points to Sergey for making me laugh when I really needed it, 10 points for so-and-so just for being a nice person. And so, and on it went. And so every month you would get these points from your colleagues and you would learn what they liked about working with you. And if you didn't get points, then it would give you an opportunity to ask, like, what's going on? Do I need to work out loud a little bit more? Like, is everything okay? Like one guy wasn't getting any points and he asked and he said, like, I'm doing a really good job, but I don't get any points. And the team came back to him and said, well, you're doing a really good job, but so is everybody. Like, that's kind of our job, is to do a good job. But you're not showing up to any of the team meetings or the team building activities. And the team, it's really kind of important to the team that you're there. And so he was like, oh, I just didn't realize it was so important. So for him, it was a bit of a wake-up call. Now, so it was a nice system as a form of feedback, and we did this every single month. Now, I wouldn't tie it to money. I think it's called merit money, but I wouldn't tie it to money. But what we did is we ended up tying it to money because we had a high level of trust on the team. So every month, Tahira, our finance queen, would set aside a certain percentage of the revenue for our bonus money. And then every month we rolled the dice. And if we rolled a 6, we got a payout depending on how much merit money we had collected. If we didn't roll a 6, the money would roll over to the next month and we would roll again. And once we went 17 months without rolling a 6, and it was like huge cash payout, like, woo, like Christmas is a long way. It was totally awesome. So in the end, it was, we tied it to money and it ended up being fun. But the point is to give feedback. So that was a really long answer to your question, though, in terms of what leaders can do. But I think putting regular feedback loops in place of all kinds and sorts, it's going to take a lot of time. But as a leader, I think that's sort of time well spent.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think sometimes we totally underestimate it, because what my studies have shown is that usually leaders, although they should probably spend, 70% on leadership, real leadership, they're spending 20% on leadership because there's so much involved in operational tasks. but it is still our choice to take that time for real leadership tasks in order to do those. Because at one-on-ones with a team, and we also know that very often we have just too many team members for a normal team, like a normal leadership span, to say so, but still it works out and it pays back. And I think that is like super important. So what you were mentioning is it's merit money, MERIT. Did I understand
Correct.
correctly?
Yeah, not married money, but that's yeah, I see that from Dieter. It's not married. Yeah, it's merit. Sorry, it
It's
was my pronunciation.
Oh no, perfect. It's merit money. So I'm just typing it also here into the chat that we have that. And
Great.
it's fantastic. So here it is, merit money as a possibility to show appreciation, give feedback, and also have sort of a gamified approach in your team and combat the out of sight, out of mind syndrome. Ursula is asking a question here. So what are the most essential skills a virtual facilitator needs to improve? So that's a tough one, because we do know, and thanks so much, Ursula, for picking that up, because we do know that virtual meetings have not been going very well this year. And that's also why, unfortunately, even though Zoom is my totally preferred tool, the term Zoom fatigue came up, right? Even though it's not because of Zoom, but it is because of us not facilitating or preparing, facilitating and following up properly. So let's pick up on this super important question. Thanks, Ursula. And for the others out there, we just have like a few minutes left. So if there is one more question, just type it in now, because after that, I need to say goodbye to you. But Lisette.
I'll be fast. I'll try not to ramble too much. I'm gonna tell you, it's Friday night and I'm rambly. So, so in terms of virtual facilitation skills, one is I really feel that as a facilitator, there's a lot of tools that we have to put in our toolbox. And some of the most effective skills that I've learned how to use is, one, use virtual whiteboards to track like your agenda. I mean, the very basics of meetings, right, are start on time, end on time, and have an agenda. And it's a low bar, but that most people don't even have that. And then, of course, if we're going to go back to Dieter's question of start with why, I would say we always want to start our meeting with why are we here, and why is every person at that meeting there? What are they contributing? At Management 3.0, in the very beginning, we used to have no meetings, and if you wanted to have one, you had to convince people to come. So I would actually have to say, Tahira, I need you there because we're making budgeting decisions and we need your input on that. So it was kind of a backwards way. No meetings allowed, but if you wanted to, we had to convince people to come. So there's a preparing and having an agenda. There's making sure everybody gets a chance to speak. So as a facilitator, making sure that everybody gets their voice heard is a huge skill, because there's people that go on, like me, that go on and on and on. And we can take over a meeting, right? And our ideas get heard, but other people's ideas don't get heard. So good timekeeping and good person keeping. And then I would also say that one of the things that has helped me the most in terms of online facilitation is learning liberating structures. And liberating structures are just all kinds of facilitation techniques that you can use depending on what you need. And I have to say that's been one of the most valuable things that I've learned, is liberating structures. So that just is putting things in your toolbox. And then, of course, getting comfortable online. If you're not comfortable online, like making sure that you're comfortable in your square, that you've got a nice square that you're facilitating from, that you have good lighting, and that you've got a great internet connection. I've got the fancy Bose headset. My sister married a guy from Amazon, so I got like this rad Christmas gift. So thanks, but I love it. You don't need like a fancy noise canceling headset, but like have good equipment. If you're really going to professionally facilitate online, make sure that it looks good. I think, when I used to, in my band days, I always used to tell, there's this one band that just hated getting dressed up for shows. And I said, nobody wants to see you in your sweatpants on stage. Like, people are coming to see gods, they want to see like people that know what they're doing on stage. They don't want to see you in your sweatpants. That's for when you go home. And I feel like the same is true online. Right? Like, it's not that you necessarily need to, I've got my yoga pants on, but I'm in a nice shirt and, like well lit and everything. So let me break it down like this. So just to end in one succinct way, I think that great online facilitation is a combination of design, infrastructure, and learning facilitation skills.
I love that. I love that. May I just add one point that I just had a conversation again, a little bit of frustrating one with a colleague, because I think that whether virtual or not virtual, I think, as you were saying, the preparation, having a meeting agenda, assigning maybe a facilitator beforehand, a minute taker beforehand, whatever, but sending out calendar invites. I must say that for me, really, it's so interesting. I'm still involved in so many working groups or organizations where I receive an email that invites me to a meeting. I don't receive a calendar invite. And then 20 people who are in the meeting, or however, how many there are, 10 people, needs to create a calendar item on their own. So it's super inefficient. Very often I get another email with the meeting room link. So that's why we usually start 15 minutes late, because people are looking for the information. And I just want to say, because this is not about virtual teams in any kind of business context, in my personal opinion, but let me know, I'm curious about your opinion, Lisette. I think calendar invites really are fundamental for an efficient organization of a work infrastructure. That's my personal opinion.
Yeah, I have a love-hate relationship with calendar invites for a long time. My system didn't work with other systems, and so I was creative. But you're right, like having an efficient way to book time with people. But I will say with calendar invites, one thing that I would add to that is book your meetings for 25 minutes instead of 30 and 45 minutes instead of an hour, and take a break in between. Out of all the meeting facilitation tips that I can ever give is take more breaks, because Zoom fatigue is real. But 5 years ago, when I first started the podcast, I interviewed NASA, and NASA was telling me that they don't go more than 40 minutes without taking a 5 to 10 minute break, because at the time they called it virtual fatigue. And that was like years ago. And so I would say, if you're facilitating meetings or if you're booking calendar invites, Microsoft Outlook has this now where you can do a 25-minute or a 50-minute meeting automatically, book breaks in between. And if you're facilitating a meeting that's longer than 40 minutes, take a break. Just take a 5 minute break, jumping jacks. I do like squats and sit-ups and push-ups during my breaks. And you'd think I'd be buffer than I am, but you have to do a lot of squats to get buff, I'd say. But still, it's like you get the blood moving, and you refresh yourself a bit.
Absolutely. And I think I just want to pick up on one thing that Liliana was mentioning here. So also being in a good mood. Absolutely. And I think that's also something that you as a virtual meeting facilitator or virtual leader need to be very much aware of, the way you open up the meeting and the way that hopefully you have a small check-in. That is the first point of the meeting agenda, that you do something informal, checking on the moods, checking in on your people is something super important. Also visual cues. So how are you talking to your people and addressing them? So thanks so much for this super important comment here as well. Yeah. Oh my God, we covered so many topics. There was a long discussion. Thanks so much for your comments out there. Yes, and we see also Ursula says, yeah, it's a facilitator mindset. Let me ask one last question for you, Lisette. So as a last question, I would address a little bit the topic of liberating structures that you mentioned. And you have seen, for those who are not familiar with liberating structures, go and check it out. As a facilitator, it's super important. And also, if you go to my YouTube channel, I have a beautiful interview with Henry Lipmanowitz. Personally, I had him here on my show 2 months ago. Yeah, I was super happy to have him. And the week after I interviewed Henry, there was Isman Tanuri with me here on the show, and he was talking about liberating structure and facilitation in the virtual space. So definitely check that out. I will also post the links later on to the comment section here. But if we now ask your favorite liberating structure, Lisette, and the one that you very often use or would recommend to look in, for example, first, which one would that be?
My very favorite one is the 1, 2, 4 all. So it starts with a 1-minute brainstorm by yourself, and then you pair people up, and then you take those pairs and put them into fours, and then you take the fours and debrief all together. And the reason why I like that one so much is because it brings out the quieter voices in the group. So everybody's ideas get heard, and the louder voices will amplify the quieter ones when you go from a smaller to a larger group. And I just think it's one of the most brilliant, simple techniques out there that is absolutely possible. So yeah, the 1, 2, 4 all, that's one of my favorites. And drawing together. I really can't emphasize enough how important visualizing your work is online, and learning how to draw together in a virtual whiteboard. Mural, and what Miro and Mural can do these days, absolutely fantastic. Fantastic.
Absolutely true. And I think so. For those of you out there who go to the Liberating Structures webpage, you will find immediately 1, 2, 4 all. I think it's even the first technique up on the webpage. I would really encourage you also to download the app of Liberating Structures. Super useful because it's very nice and handy and very well also built up. And there is a tremendous Slack channel that you can access from the webpage, where you can access the whole Liberating Structures community across the globe that are offering advice, where you can post your questions, where you can read through the comments of others. That is really tremendously powerful as well. Fantastic. I love it. We close with Liberating Structures. I'm a huge fan of that. Thanks so much for bringing it on. Thanks, Lisette. It was really tremendous having you there. And I think all the people out there are like now typing into thank you, thank you, thank you very much.
Oh,
thanks so much for being with us. Here. Thanks for connecting at that time. I know that both of us, we are going to have like a calm weekend now, hopefully. And we're staying in touch. And thank you so much. You know that I told you I have sort of a virtual cocktail backstage prepared. So I'm joining you immediately. I'm just closing up here.
Awesome.
Thank you very much, Lisette. Bye. Well, thank you so much to everybody for joining us in today's virtual space here at LinkedIn Live. And I'm not sure if you have seen, but next week there is going to be a LinkedIn Live with several guests that the topic is more about the reflection of this year. And I'm really happy because the reflection that I want to do with everybody out there is about learning. And I'm very excited because I'm going to be joined by 3 guests. So one is John Stepper. John Stepper is joining me, and we're going to talk a lot about working out loud. Working out loud is a fantastic peer learning / exchange method that we will be discussing in the framework also about what happened this year. Besides that, I have Pari Namazi joining from Vienna or Dubai. I'm not so sure where she's currently at. And she's a leadership executive coach, a lot into learning and learning management design. We're going to reflect with her as well. And last but not least, from Ireland, from the south of Ireland, but from my north, there is Fergal Connolly joining, a learning consultant at Facebook. So this is going to be next week, our stage here. And I have sort of a small Christmas surprise, because you know that usually in my virtual events, I always have with me the tremendous DJ Virtual Space Hero, and he will be opening up for the first time the LinkedIn Live floor. So let's see how that goes. But be prepared to move a little bit your body when you join us on the stage. And with that, I'm wishing you all a beautiful weekend. Let me know maybe also in the comments or approach me on LinkedIn what you think about this different time in the afternoon, late afternoon. Should it be rather during the week and not on a Friday? So I'm really happy and very much looking forward to your comments. And well, enjoy your weekend. See you next week, reflecting on this year's learning together. Bye.